Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Outlands RoyalTea, a web-based interview show where the current crown of the Outlands interviews past kings and queens of the Outlands to talk about their stories from their time upon the Stag Thrones. I'll be your host today. My name is Bela Kosh of the Chippendales. I am the current king of the Outlands, and I'm very excited today to have as my guest His Grace Duke Christopher of Hoghton. Your Grace, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Your Majesty.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, some things you'd like us to know for starters, like how long have you been in the SCA?
I got into the SCA originally very young in the Kingdom of the West with my father and family. My first event was March Crown of the West at the end of AS5. This upcoming March will be my 50th anniversary from when I joined the SCA.
Wow. How old were you at that first event?
I was 11.
11. That's amazing. So
Yep.
Pretty much you've been in your whole life, really.
Just about, yes. 11, been around a number of kingdoms, currently living in the Outlands. I've been here well over 30 years now.
And so you were the 5th crown of the Outlands, if I have that right, correct?
Correct.
And you and your lady Kal-bardr reigned during the summer of 1988. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So before you landed in the Outlands, you had reigned in the West as king, and you also had reigned in Atenveld as king. And when you reigned here, that gave you the very huge distinction of being the first person to ever reign in 3 different kingdoms. What was that? At the time,
yes. I was the first person to do it in 3 kingdoms. It's been done several times since then. And one person, Gerrit von Kapke, who reigned here, that was his 4th kingdom when he reigned. I had the opportunity to go out to his 3rd coronation in Kal-bardr and kind of just drove out. I hadn't been very active, but drove out to his coronation in Kal-bardr to kind of surprise him because I'd waited 15 years for somebody else to reign in 3 kingdoms.
That's very cool. So were there big differences between the cultures or the way things are done from kingdom to kingdom, or were they pretty similar? Every
kingdom is different. Certain kingdoms grow from other kingdoms and take on some of the traits of that kingdom. Atenveld was already a kingdom when I got in the SCA. It became a kingdom a couple of months in, I believe, January of AS5. So they were a kingdom a few months before I got in the SCA. So they had developed very differently from the West. Atenveld was always definitely little more, they had their own way of doing things.
Still do.
Still do.
Right, absolutely. So when you look back on it, because you only reigned one time in each kingdom, correct?
Correct.
And so if you had to pick one, what would you say? Like if you're going into the Hall of Fame of the SCA and you had to pick your hat, right? Which kingdom would you want to be thought of as being from or as your kingdom?
I would definitely say the Outlands, only that I've been in the Outlands the longest of the 3. When I was King of the West, I was very young. I was 20 when I became king. The West at that time really just ran itself. There was very little to do, fewer events, definitely, as being king. You kind of went to crown, you went to coronation, some other events, but really the kingdom ran itself. The kingdom officers did a lot more, and the king was more a figurehead. He was there to give awards, to be pretty, that kind of thing. Each time I was king again, Atenveld was definitely a different type of king. You had to do more as king. You worked a lot more with your kingdom officers. The Outlands, even more so. As the SCA has aged and progressed, the position of king has become much more important and has to do a lot more, and even more so nowadays. I never had during any of my reigns, I never had email or really computer access to anything. So that's made things in some ways easier, in some ways a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I often tell people who think they would like to be crowned, plan at least 20 to 30 hours a week of answering emails and text messages and phone calls because they're coming. and that's I mean, even my first reign was 19 years ago, and
Right.
a lot was still done by snail mail. We had email groups, but no social media. Cell phones weren't real big yet. So yeah, it's changed a lot, and it's changed the dynamic of the role for sure.
Right. You had to pay for phone calls. Long distance calls were expensive.
Yeah.
Most everything was done by mail or in person. You did a lot more at events or between events with those who were local. And a lot was done by mail.
Absolutely. And one of the coolest gifts I got in my first reign was a like $100 long distance charged phone card, so I could make all those calls to the kingdom officers a lot cheaper.
Absolutely.
So, was there a specific moment in time during any of your reigns where you just had that super magical, like, yeah, this is what it feels. This is now I'm a king. I get what this is all about now.
Every reign has those moments. My first coronation was 12th night in the West. And for people who've never been to a West Kingdom 12th night, even the current ones are very different. The old ones, it was primarily a court. It was a very, very long court, waiting around while the previous king gave his final awards, did everything he was going to do, received gifts, received everything from the populace. At that time, they still did a grand march. When the king steps up, everyone who wants to marches in order of precedence. They're announced in by the heralds. Sometimes they give gifts. Sometimes they're just talking. But it's a way for everyone to meet and have faces with a lot of the people in the kingdom. So you'd start out with the dukes and on down through the households. And it was a good way to meet everyone. But it definitely made for a very, very long event and a long court. And it's warm in the building. It always is, no matter where you are, whether it's summer or winter. Seems like if it's indoors, court's always hot.
Yes.
And you kind of plan for that if you can. But and things are just not going to go right. They never do. Little things will happen that you don't expect. And but that first coronation was definitely, it was like I'd been around kings before. My father had reigned twice as well as the King of the West. So I kind of had been around and knew what was involved with being king. So it wasn't a surprise. There were some things that kind of caught me off guard, but it was definitely a magical moment. The first coronation always is. How was your first coronation? Did we lock up?
Looks like we have lost connection to His Majesty. So everybody just bear with us for a few moments here, and we'll see if he reconnects.
Okay.
Hang tight. There. All right. He will hopefully be back shortly.
Okay.
By the way, hi, everybody watching. Hi, I'm Cal. I'm the behind-the-scenes guy. I'm usually trying to avoid the camera as much as possible in the show, but when His Majesty pops out, I will happily fill his very large shoes for a minute. So we'll hang tight just a second here.
I'll go ahead and plug Kal-bardr's Corner. Go to his website.
Thank you, Your Grace. I appreciate that. So I guess for a moment, Your Grace, if you have a story to tell us, if you have some interesting story from your time, if you want to regale us with a tale while we wait for His Majesty, that would be, I think, a good use of the time.
Something that'll probably come up later. I was, as His Majesty has said, the 5th King of the Outlands. It was an interesting event, the Crown Tournament. Leading up to it,
Speaking of things not going great, my computer crapped out on me just as you said that. Technology loves me. Are we back live now?
how was your first reign? What happened that was magical for you, and what do you remember from that reign?
I remember a lot. Well, there are several magical moments, but the first one was so I had got knighted the crown before the crown that I won. And so I was the baby knight of the Outlands when I won crown. And at my coronation, what really struck me was when all of the knights, when all of Arton and Hrothgar and Torrin and Olaf and yourself, like all these guys that came forward to swear fealty to the crown in that moment. That was my first like, oh, okay. I can't mess this up because these guys are going to hold me accountable. And that was like my first real magic moment of okay, I'm the king. It's really all on me. But also, I had injured my knee. I had one crown on torn ACL, and so I had surgery 2 days after crown tournament to fix it. And so my whole first reign, I couldn't fight. So for me, I got to do a lot of things that most kings don't get to do because they're always in armor out on the field or doing that type of stuff. So for me, I got to do a lot of archery and, hang out with the artists and the bards and things like that I probably wouldn't have gotten to do had I been healthy as king the first time. And that gave me a really unique perspective and one that I cherish.
Your first queen, was that Elizabeth?
It was Countess Elizabeth O'Byrne.
She, during our reign, she helped us out immensely. She happened to live in the same apartment complex as Kal-bardr and I. So she and her husband at the time did a lot for us behind the scenes and helped us out immensely during our reign.
Yeah, she's an amazing lady, and she was an amazing queen. She showed me what a pelican is, really, with her organizational skills and the way she kind of helped run things for us. Really was amazing. So during your reign in the Outlands, I know it was kind of at a bit of a tumultuous time during the kingdom. Was there anything that kind of came up that you weren't really expecting, or like, oh, there's a landmine I need to avoid at all costs?
Well, as His Majesty said, it was a rough reign, only in that the king and queen prior to us, there were some issues. The first three kings and queens of the Outlands had some issues with Hagen and Beatrix, the fourth king and queen of the Outlands. There were some issues that came up, and it ended up kind of going to the board of directors, where I was Kingdom Earl Marshal at the time, and the kingdom was instructed that for that crown tournament, it would be a field coronation. There were some decisions I had to make based on that. After I'd won, whoever won would decide certain things about awards being given to Hagen and Beatrix. That was a crown. I'd fought in the crown before that, and I fought in the finals against Hagen. And at that time, King's Champion was always the finalist. So I'd been King's Champion during that reign. I'd seen some of the things that were going on, had my own opinions, but I definitely wanted to win the fifth crown, to win that crown, primarily because I felt I'd been in the situation before. As King of Atenveldt, the king and queen were removed just before my coronation. There was a regent. In Atenveldt, it's tradition that the king crowns himself. So it worked out. We didn't even need to have the king and queen present for the coronation. They were at the event, but we had to, basically I crowned myself. I crowned my lady at the time and had a reign where we went from there, had to deal with a lot of the fallout from that. So I felt that going into an Outlands crown where there would be issues following the crown itself, it was a crown I definitely wanted to win because I felt I'd been through it before and could help the kingdom deal with what was going on. I did win the crown. There was only one other person who'd ever reigned in that crown. Earl Micah was in that crown. We never drew each other in the list. He'd actually had my number, so in a way, I'm very glad I didn't draw him. I fought Earl Christopher in the finals. He was still unbelted at that time. We talked about it years afterwards, and he said he was very glad that he didn't win that crown. He said he wasn't ready. But I threw the killing blow, and 15 minutes later, I had the crown on my head. It was definitely a different experience. We were one of the things that whoever won would decide if Hagen was already a knight, he would be a count, Beatrix would be a countess. One of the things that was definitely kind of being discussed was whether she would be admitted to the Order of the Rose, whether she would be a Lady of the Rose, and be given a patent of arms. And that was left up to the crown at that time. My lady and I definitely felt that it would be a bad precedent to not have a queen of the Outlands not be a Lady of the Rose. So we just, in addition to naming her as Countess, we named her into the Order of the Rose, just so that precedent would not be set at that time.
I definitely understand that way of thinking for sure. And honestly, everything I've heard, as I said earlier off show, I started about a year and a half after you stepped down from your reign.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't here while you were king, but anyone that I've ever heard talk about your reign talks about it with, stardust in their eyes, and mentions it being just a really magical summer of fun and bringing the kingdom together. So I think you definitely succeeded.
It had to be, and that was our goal, not only to win crown, but at that point, really to show the kingdom that we could have fun again, because it was not fun at the end of Hagen and Beatrix's reign, and the kingdom needed it. And we traveled a lot. It was important to show not only everyone in the Outlands, but everyone in the other kingdoms that we're okay. We can have fun. To show the board, hey, we had this problem. It was a hiccup. We're okay. We can do this.
That's awesome. Is there a particular award that you've gotten to give out that is your favorite, or that you really enjoy giving out as king? Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. I'm just the airplane has passed. I know I was muted.
Okay.
Thank you. During that reign, the one thing, it's not even an award I gave, but of awards we gave, the one that still sticks with me was a laurel we created. We admitted Mistress Curiel of Wendover Cliff to the Order of the Laurel, and at the time she was definitely deserving, a wonderful person, and in retrospect, it's probably the award I'm most happy to have given.
That's really cool. The first summer I was in, there were several events that happened on her land.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to meet her and be around the fire and listen to her tell stories. And it was just magical. And that's part of why during our first reign, shortly after she passed, Elizabeth and I created the Wendover Bard position in her honor. Because she was just such an amazing woman.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. I didn't know that you were the one that did that. That's very cool. Are there any, as someone who's traveled around a lot and been king in 3 different kingdoms, what would you say is the thing that the Outlands is known the most for to outsiders?
Obviously, the first thing is drums. We did that when we processed into Pennsic. Pennsic at that time still had grand court. There were a lot fewer kingdoms. We were the baby kingdom for Pennsic when I was king. So we got to sit on the very end of the dais with all the other kings and queens. We processed into drums. We took on Middle Eastern dress. We were drummed into court. Kal-bardr was carried in a palanquin. We were
awesome.
tossing chocolate coins. Instead of using the Outlands thrones, we had a futon mattress that we put on the dais and lounged during court. And we were on the end, so we had people feeding us and fanning us and taking care of us. And Hillary, who was steward at the time, talked to me afterwards and said, it seemed like you were there and you were amused by what was going on and being entertained by the other kingdoms. And it was just a good way to show the Outlands was having fun at the time to everyone else in the SCA.
Yeah, I've heard stories about that processional, and my first Pennsic, we tried to do something similar. We didn't get to lounge like you did, but I did have several amazing ladies take turns fanning me during court, because that particular Pennsic Grand Court, there were 18 peerages that were made. Mm-hmm. So it was like a 4-hour court in that humidity.
The year before, when Artan was king at Pennsic, Kal-bardr and I happened to bring a big fan, about a 5-foot fan, and we were fanning the crowns because court was just even hotter than normal, and just trying to keep the king and queen as comfortable as they could, keeping them in cold drinks and keeping them fanned, and trying to fan a little bit to the crowns next to us as well.
That's very cool. And that brings me up to something that I think you're known for in this kingdom. You reigned in 88, and it was a while ago, and you yourself have said you haven't been as active as you used to be, and really who is. But I know I've seen you come to events and come to practices and things like that, and have moments of time with the crown. And you did it with me several times during previous reigns where you kind of pulled me aside and gave me some advice, and maybe you saw something that I didn't see and you brought it to my attention. And that's just another example to me of the way, while it might have been a while since you've been king, you've constantly served this kingdom, and you're constantly doing what you can to help the crown be better at their jobs.
It's my responsibility as a knight, as a duke, and as a pelican to do what I can for anyone if I see it. You just do what needs to be done.
Well, you're very good at it, and I'm very appreciative of all the times that you've talked to me personally, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of folks when I say thank you for what you continue to do for the kingdom.
Well, there was a long period of time. I got a job as a retail manager, so I was working weekends, and for almost 15 years, I wasn't doing SCA, and I lost a lot of the history and the development of the Outlands during that period. A lot of people who grew up during that period, yourself included, I really didn't have the opportunity to be around to see them develop in the SCA. Since that time, and with the internet, I've been able to kind of keep up, and I do a lot to just kind of, if nothing else, kind of keep up with what's going on, even if I'm not at events as much. My lady has really moved on. She's concentrating on her artwork. She does a lot of that. She wouldn't be able to fight. Her love of the SCA was fighting, the camaraderie of the heavy combat. She tried fencing. She enjoyed it. It wasn't quite the same. But going to an event just by myself and usually just day tripping, it's not quite the same.
Absolutely. Is there a particular piece of advice that you like to give to someone that is their first reign?
The first thing that always comes to mind is read it before you hand it to the herald. At my coronation, I had an odd situation where it had been going on long. We were hot. It was, well into it. Some friends from a little group in the far reaches of the kingdom came up and handed me a scroll. I was tired. I wasn't thinking. I handed it to the herald. They had visited a barony in the kingdom of Caid. They brought a letter from the Baroness of the barony of the Isles, stating that she was unhappy with Caid and wanted to present herself to the kingdom of the West, and that without the Isles, Caids would be Cads. The history of the name of the Caid is Calafia, Angels, Isles, and Drybergen were the first four kingdoms, or the first four baronies of Caid, and that's how they got their name. Without the Isles, and it went from there. And I had the king and queen of Caid sitting down the dais away from me, and they were giving me some very strange looks. But, definitely read it before you give it to the herald.
That is a very good piece of advice.
Learn from experience. That's the other thing. You're going to make mistakes. Don't make them again. Talk to your advisors, talk to people, talk to everyone. If you can, visit the small groups. Visit the groups on the outlying parts of the kingdom. They're the ones who are really having fun. Visit them before you're king, after you're king. Go to the events when the king isn't there.
Those are all great pieces of advice, for sure. During your time as Crown of the Outlands, was there a piece of regalia that you is your favorite piece of regalia?
I have to go with lightning. I love Thunderhead, but lightning. I got to carry lightning quite a bit during the reign prior to mine as champion, and even though Iroh was my champion and held it, I still tended to keep lightning a lot myself.
I can understand that. It is an amazing sword for sure.
Absolutely, and beautiful.
Is there a particular tradition in the Outlands that you're very fond of, or you think of as being uniquely Outlands?
I love the Baby Knights chain. Somewhere in there is one of my links. It was put together before we were even a kingdom, before the first crown tournament. And many of the knights at the time of Atenveld, those who lived in the Outlands, put one of their links in there. Mine's in there somewhere. I know it's one of 3 identical links, so sometimes I don't know which one exactly it is, but that a tradition that actually I wish I'd started, but wasn't around when I started, when I was crowned, is collecting the soil, the dirt from each tourney field, and starting the crown tournament with kind of an invocation of spreading that dirt around the Outlands, around the tournament field, to remind everyone who's been there before them. The reading of the previous crowns, the previous kings and queens of the Outlands. I know that's done in other realms. Again, it's history, and that's important. Remembering the names of people who are there before you.
Absolutely, yeah. I've always loved the dirt, the sacred earth ceremony before crowning, and I know it kind of. I forgot to bring this up with him actually when I had him on last time. Rothgar, the scaldings thing started kind of for him, and it was supposed to be a one-off thing, and then people loved it and started just doing it and using it for crowns and coronations, and I love it as well. I think it's very powerful, and I think it's very, like you said, important to remember our past in those moments of importance, to make sure their names are invoked to be there in the hall with us at that time. I think that's a very important thing. And I think Rothar's kind of gotten over it a little bit because it's not done every time, but it's still done a lot. And I like it, and I'm happy stealing it from him.
Absolutely.
He can have all the credit.
I enjoy it when it's done.
Absolutely. Is there anything from your reigns, whether it was here or the West or Atenveld, that you look back on and wish, man, I really wish I'd have done that slightly different, or I wish I had that one thing to do over?
I think everyone does. One of the things I learned before I was King of Atenvelt, I was Prince of the Sun. And something I learned at that time, it was probably, let me think, that would have been early 80s. The Principality of the Sun was making waves of maybe becoming a kingdom. At that time, Elfled was steward of the SCA. She and many of the people who were in power in the Principality of the Sun, primarily the Barony of Atenvelt, didn't get along very well. There was definitely some animosity between Barony of Atenvelt and Barony of Alberon. I wrote a letter to the board recommending that perhaps Elfled as steward wasn't the best person to be in charge of looking at if the Sun was going to become a kingdom. What I learned is, even though Elfled and many of the people of Alberon at that time didn't necessarily get along personally, as a barony, they stood up for her, and they stood up for their own. And that's something I've learned a lot of groups do. Alberon definitely stands up for their own. They may not get along with each other, but they'll stand up for their own. And I think that's something that many groups will do. And as king, you need to be aware of that. If you manage to piss off one person, you're probably going to piss off a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Outlands especially, I think we have that. I'll beat the crap out of my brother all day long. But as soon as someone else picks on him, now you're going to fight both of us.
Yep. And it's the same type of thing. And that's another thing that the Outlands, I mean, everywhere, I think that's everywhere, but definitely the Outlands will definitely stand up for its own.
For sure. So when you won crown in the Outlands, were you fighting sword and shield? Was that your main style? Is that what you won all of your crowns with, or?
I fought sword and shield in all of my crowns. I've fought other weapons. Way back in the West, I used to fight with a little 6-foot spear, just thrusting only. I had a good time with it. Use it in melees. Somebody would charge in the way they always do, and I had a little weapon on my belt. I'd draw that and fight a little short sword and spear. And realized, hey, this is kind of fun. I could fight sword and spear. Hey, my hand's getting hit a lot. I'm going to put a basket hilt on my spear. And started fighting that way a lot. When I was King of the West, I traveled down to Kingdom of Atenvelt for Burrow Creek 3 and met Asaduddin, who fought Madhu and Shield. He was the first person in the SCA to fight Madhu. And went, hey, I fight something similar to that. And we already started talking, and I got to know Assad for the first time. And his was a little different. He had the point on both ends. I just had the one. But it was something that developed independently. But it's a good fighting style, and I enjoyed fighting Madhu. I picked that up a bit. But sword and shield really has kind of been my preferred fighting style. That particular crown, I think I put a thrusting tip on my sword. I've been fighting with that a little bit. I had a bright pink or bright orange trailer hitch cover on it. And Irol, who I fought in the finals, was 2-sword. And I mostly just waved it in his face to make him, it's a thrusting tip, it's a thrusting tip, it's a thrusting tip. And mostly distracted him with that the whole time.
Very cool. So we just had a question that came in from, I believe, Count Oz from Kaid. Mm-hmm. And he wants to know if, as someone who's reigned in multiple kingdoms, what advice would you give to somebody that has reigned somewhere else before they entered a crown in the Outlands?
Learn the traditions, learn the customs, learn the whys. Why are things done? I made sure I tried to do that when I moved to Atenvelt. Get to know people. Get to know the people who founded the kingdom, who founded the baronies. Learn the whys. Why are things done? You know that there are things done. There are lots of traditions. How did they come to be? What brought them about? Why do we do the things we do?
Very cool. What would you say is what the thing that what does it mean to you to have been Crown of the Outlands? Or what does it mean to be Crown of the Outlands, in your opinion?
Definitely different times back then, but being King of the Outlands is definitely, there are certain things that people expect of you. They expect you to be regal. You need to be funny at the right time. You need to be serious at the right time. You need to travel. The Outlands is, it's not as big as some kingdoms. It's long. It's definitely not as big as Atenveldt was when I was king, because that included the Outlands and Artemisia. It was an immense kingdom. Travel, that's the other big thing. When you move into a kingdom, go to the outline, go to the other baronies, get to know the people, have them get to know you. Don't just go to the group you're going to live in and suddenly you're king and nobody knows you. Become known. Do something that that brings attention to you. And that goes for fighting, that goes for anything. I worked the California Renaissance Fair many years ago, and one of the actors there had something he called his umbrella. It was like his green umbrella. It was just something he did that was a little out of the ordinary, that brought attention to him. Giovanni did it when he was coming up. He was the rose riffraff. It wasn't pink, it was rose. And he traveled a lot. People knew Giovanni. They knew, oh, he's the rose guy, the pink guy. Even if they didn't know Giovanni, they knew who he was. And that's important. If you move into another kingdom, become known. Have people know you and hopefully know the good things about you.
Very good advice. Very, very good advice. Is there, I know, like you said, you haven't been as active as you'd like to be, and you might not have a good answer for this question, but is there someone that you would like to see have an opportunity to serve the Outlands as crown that hasn't done so yet?
From way back when, I'd love to see Raymond have the opportunity, Raymond the Quiet, as one of the, in many ways, one of the founders of the kingdom of the Outlands, the principality and the kingdom. I'd also like to see Gellir and my name is, I'm blanking his name. Mavriki, yes, Mavriki and Gellir, I think would bring a nice, in some way, a little bit of change. They're well-traveled, they're well-known in Artemisia and other kingdoms. They've been around, everyone knows them. They'd make a wonderful king and queen of the Outlands. They have a lot of history and a lot of good ideas. I think they'd be good for the kingdom.
Well, Raymond had put a letter in for the crown that we had to postpone 4 times. So he might be fighting in the next one when we have it. There's hope. I got my fingers crossed. I hope he puts it.
I'd love to see it.
And I know Mav and Gellir have fought a fair amount. They haven't been recently, but who knows? After a post however long pandemic not being able to fight, maybe they'll want to. Is there an event that is one that you would think is your favorite, or an event in the Outlands that you think people should try to get to if they have the opportunity?
The obvious answer is Battlemore. I really haven't been to the full event. When Outlands had its, I believe its 20th anniversary, I went to that Battlemore and just day tripped it down there. Everything I've seen about Battlemore, it's a wonderful event. Really, again, go to the small groups. Go to the events in Windkeep, Hunter's Feast. Some of the really small groups are lots of fun. And they put on good events. Go when the crown isn't there.
Very cool. Count Flanagan would like to know, what is your favorite war and what makes it your favorite war?
Estrella. Only because I remember going to Burrow Creek. I missed the first 2. Hoghton Towers, my father's family household was there. So I've seen, some Super 8 film of Burrow Creeks 1 and 2, got all the stories, was king at Burrow Creek 3, moved to Aytenvelt shortly after Burrow Creek 3. I actually, at Burrow Creek 4, had just bought a new Aytenvelt standard pot helm and loaned my old armor out to a friend of mine and fought incognito, since it was the first war I fought against my old kingdom.
That sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I just got to enjoy the war and not be targeted, as it were. But I was involved very heavily in both of the Great Desert Wars, kind of helped run the second one, and autocrated Burrow Creek 2, or Estrella 2. The second one was, I guess it's event steward now, but it was autocrat then, and ran that war shortly before I moved to the Outlands.
Very cool. Lord Cal from Meridias asked earlier, in your 50 years in the SCA, what would you say has been the biggest change to the SCA?
There are a lot of changes. It's always evolving. Every new person who comes into the SCA changes it just a little bit. While you're there, you don't necessarily notice it. If you're away, you tend to notice it a little bit more. Right now, I think people are definitely more, I don't want to say smarter. They're more succinct. There's a lot more communication. People tend to be more, where I think of a lot of the people of from many, many years ago. If there was a trait, it would have been humility. And the trait now would be franchise.
Okay.
It's just a different way of presenting yourself. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Just when I started fighting, I was at the very end of if it hits you and you pulled your blows because you didn't want to hurt somebody. There wasn't really much in the way of armor. When I started fighting, I had a knee pad, I had an elbow pad. I wore nothing on my back leg at all. I knew people who fought with a helmet and a kite shield, and that was all they fought in. So seeing the progression of armor, seeing carpet armor to what's available now, is just tremendous. Watching fighters and just how they look on the field is an immense change. It makes it more difficult in some ways, in that it's much more expensive. It's harder to get into it, but we should never discourage people who don't look good because they're trying. I mean, anyone can, if you have bad armor, throw a surcoat over it. You'll look great. But we should never discourage someone who's fighting or doing anything because of how they're looking, because they may not be able to afford it. They may not have the time or the effort. I couldn't buy things when I was growing up. We had to make all of our own. Most of my armor was actually hand-me-downs. I'd go into the garage and see what my dad wasn't using. Go, well, I can kind of pound this a bit, and I have no real natural skills when it comes to making things. I made chainmail for my first armor out of coat hangers. That's what I used for many years, was just coat hanger chainmail, because it's all I had. And a knee pad. We did trades with the group in Lionsgate, Vancouver, British Columbia. My dad was friends with the Baron up there, and they could get hockey gloves and lacrosse gloves, and they'd ship us down a box of hockey gloves, and we'd use those. So yeah, the fact that you can just go out and go to an event and buy all your armor is a huge change. And you miss out a lot of things. You miss out on learning to make things, learning how things are made. I'm going to learn this. I'm going to just look on YouTube and see how to do things. We didn't have that. We had to go to the library and look up books, if we could even find the books, to try and find out how things were done. We did a lot of things ourselves just to try and figure out how it was done, because it wasn't documented anywhere. And that's a big change in the SCA.
The quickness and ease of which someone can get information is huge. I know I played 9 years before I found a painting. It was actually a drawing, not a painting, of what my persona would look like not in armor, because I have a not mainstream persona. I'm Conquest era Magyar, and that's not something everyone knows about. So I played for 9 years before I saw anything to give me any kind of idea of what I should look like even. So, and that was going to college libraries and searching and requesting books from 5 states away. And now with the push of a button, you can get 20 pictures right now.
And we were lucky in this area because we had access to the Air Force Library. If you did an interlibrary exchange that a lot of people didn't have access to.
Yeah, that is big change. And I think in most ways for the better. I do agree with your point though, too, of one of the things that I think we can all be better at is especially with the newer people, when they have, they've worked really, really hard on this fancy dress and they think they look pretty because they spent time and energy, and it's a beautiful dress and they want to just fit in and be one of us. And then someone goes, but it has a zipper or something like that. It's like, I wish we would do better at encouraging those people and finding ways to go, oh, this is amazing. Well, maybe next time I'll show you how to do it without a zipper, instead of pointing out the things that are wrong.
We need to welcome the fringe groups, the fringe people, just to encourage more people to participate, to join in and be welcomed. It's important.
Very, very much so. So we touched on at the beginning of this answer, you talked a little bit about humility and franchise. As a member of the chivalry, is there a virtue that speaks to you as the one that you feel is the keystone that holds all of them together?
To me, it is humility. It is the most important in my mind. Just being able to make fun of yourself, to not be offended by things when they happen, and just put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's just very important to the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated yourself, and just make everyone welcome. It's important in the SCA.
Very much so. Very much so.
What about you?
For me, it's temperance. Because I think if we don't have temperance, it's easy to focus too much on prowess, or focus too much on largesse, or focus on any one thing to the detriment of the others. And so to me, temperance is that thing that kind of reins you back and makes you go, no, all of this is important, not just the one thing. So that's always been pretty big for me, because I'm also kind of the guy where I get hyper focused on the one thing, and that's often all I can see at that moment. So focusing and thinking about temperance really helps ground me more. So
I think we can all do that sometimes, and just kind of focus on one thing, and you kind of lose sight of the other things that are going on.
Absolutely. So Cal put a question here, and I want to kind of change it a little bit, but I did want to bring it up. So I've seen during some of these the Murder of Dukes interviews and other things where Johann will post and he'll put the Black Duke, and I'll mention being the Bone Duke or whatever, and you put on there the Colorless Duke, and I hadn't seen you do that before, but I love it. I actually talk to me a little bit about the colorless thing.
Okay. For years, I actually thought about that because in my mind, and I talked to Arton about this, the tradition was when you are king of the Outlands twice, you get your color. I'd been king of Atenveld when the Outlands was a principality, so it was part of the Outlands. So in a way, I was king of the Outlands, but not. I'd never truly been king of the Outlands twice. So in my mind, I didn't have a color. In talking to Johann, I was realizing that there were others who'd been king of the Outlands once, king of another kingdom, who were being given colors. And it was like, well, I'd like to win the crown of the Outlands again. Don't know if it'll ever happen. It would take a lot of work. I'd like to earn that color. But if there are others, I'd like to be included in that group. So that's kind of why I went with the Colorless Duke. I haven't been King of the Outlands twice. So in my mind, I really haven't earned that color. Even though technically I have been King of the Outlands twice.
Well, Your Grace, I think if you wanted a color, you could just take one, and I'd support that. First of all,
I'm actually good with the Colorless Duke.
I really like that a lot too. I think it's very cool and sets you apart from the rest of us. Actually,
that and there aren't many colors left anyway.
Well, that is very true.
Trying to be, sable and ore are my colors. There are those who are going with things that are fringy as far as whether they're actually colors or not, but more describe the person. The Metal Duke.
Yep.
The Bone Duke. Bone is a color. It suits you very well.
It is, but it's also my arms are white and black, and exactly. Those colors were taken. So
yeah, and both sable and ore are taken as well, as well as argent, which my tower is argent. So there aren't a whole lot of colors left.
It's true. But to that other point, with the board of directors postponing things at least through May again, so that puts at least 4 more months of time before we can even think about having another Crown tournament. You've got time to train, Your Grace, and I'd be happy to help any way I could if you'd like to put a letter.
I've thought about it. As I said, my lady is not active, and that makes it a little bit rough. I don't know if I would be able to, give the Outlands my what I feel it deserves. Plus, it's a lot different now. There's a lot more travel expected, a lot more inter-kingdom events that people travel to as king and queen. It requires a lot of time and a lot of money.
That is true. Very true.
I'd love to do it. I've thought about it. Maybe after I retire, down the road a ways, and we'll see.
Well, as someone who looks up to you and thinks of you as a hero, let me say right here, right now, should you reach the point that you want to get serious and train and do those things to try and make it happen, I will do everything in my power to help you any way I can.
If it comes to it, and I'll take you up on that. Of course, I've donated my armor. I sold my helmet. I have my shield.
Is that the only thing you kept? Is your shield?
I still have my shield. Okay.
What was it about the shield that made it be the one thing that you wanted to keep?
It's actually a little different than any other shield. It's an aluminum shield. At one point, I fought with just a standard heater, and then I realized, hey, I like having just like a little extra point on the edge. So I kind of had it where it went up and came down a bit. And then as I fought in the Outlands, more people were using thrusting tips, and I was catching that little thrusting tip through the middle of them. So I added a center point. So it kind of goes up, and it's got 2 dips, not cutouts, but add-ons. And it sits right. When I hold it, it's in position. My arm's comfortable. I just still like the shield. Every once in a while, I'll just put it on and go, oh yeah, I can still do this.
It's your whoopee. It's your whoopee shield. I get it now.
Yep.
Very cool.
I'd have to tune it up a bit, of course, and make it legal again, but I can still use it, I think.
That's awesome. If you could pick the thing that you were remembered for as king, what would you want that to be?
There was one tradition we started during our reign that's still around. Because of what happened, one of the things that came up during the previous reign was the sanctity of the circle. It was felt that perhaps that was being not complied with. During our reign, we started the tradition that at the beginning of any circle, any peerage circle, everyone, clasps arm to shoulder, and we state that everything that is, said within the circle remains within the circle to maintain the sanctity of that circle And we started that tradition, and I'm very happy that it's still used, because that is still very, very important.
I wasn't aware that that started during your reign, and that's a very cool piece.
It was because of what happened in the reign prior to ours that it became necessary. And yes, it did start during our reign. I'm very happy that it's still used.
That is a very, very cool thing, and thank you for starting that, because I like that tradition as well. I really enjoy. It's also I don't know if it started during your reign, but we also kind of encircle with that reminder as well, and it's also a good visual indicator for people like the guards and everybody that are trying to get things ready for other things. Oh, okay, they're finishing up now.
Yep,
they're starting.
And we're all in this together. It's an unbroken circle.
Absolutely. And you're only as strong as that weakest link.
That's right.
Very cool. Your Grace, is there anything that you'd like to bring up or talk about that I haven't touched on during this conversation?
You'd mentioned magical moments, and it brought back another one that is a little bit odd. Since we had a field coronation, had the crown, became king right then. The event that was supposed to have been a coronation, we actually had as a celebration in the then Shire of Unserhofen.
Very cool.
And I remember a lot of things about that event. My wife, my now wife, Kal-bardr, had done a lot with the women fighters of the SCA. She'd started a newsletter, The Flower of Souvenance. And one of the people that she'd corresponded with had recently moved to Unserhofen at the time. And they finally got to meet each other in person and really hit it off well. And that was when Titus and Lamrai really became part of known in the kingdom and in Unserhofen. And I think that celebration, which is what we called it, that event kind of really catapulted Unserhofen towards baronial status. And I'll always remember at one point during the feast, everyone was just tapping on their glasses. And it was almost just like a melody and a song was played that I've never encountered it before then or after it. And I will always remember that moment of just listening to all the music that was being played during that one event.
That's a very cool story. Thank you for telling me that.
Welcome.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but I actually started in Unserhofen. That's where I first started, and I started like 3 months after they became a barony.
My lady started in Unserhofen as well.
So that's very awesome.
Back when they were unshaven.
Unshaven, yes. Your Grace, I want to take a moment and just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for taking the time to come on the show and tell us of your stories and the things that were important to you while you sat upon the throne. I also wanted to say thank you. Like I said earlier before, I know you've been a big influence on me throughout the years, and you've helped me become a better king. And I know that you have done that with other folks as well. So it's been a great privilege and a great honor to have you on the show this past hour and just get to chat with you and get to spend some time with you. So thank you very much.
I'm very happy to. And if anyone wants to contact me, I'd be happy to help someone out, answer any questions, share history. There's a lot of history in the SCA and in the Outlands that should never be lost. And things like this, we're taking advantage of our miners, or our shutdown, to be able to share history and learn more about the SCA. And there's so many different ways to research it if people want to. I'd love to see the Outlands history website and the library become to grow more and do more with that. But yeah, anyone who'd like to contact me, please feel free. I'd love to talk with anyone. And I'll try and be around events occasionally. I usually just do local events or a little bit more in the region more day tripping.
Well, I look forward to the time where we can have an event and come together and toast to just friendship and getting to actually be at an event again.
And hopefully hug each other again.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And hit each other with sticks.
Yes. I really can't wait to hit people with sticks.
Thank you very much for Your Majesty, and thanks to everyone else for joining in.
And for those of you that are joining us, in 2 weeks, Her Majesty will have as her guest Duchess Cecilia de Mowbray. And I'm really looking forward to that show because I'm sure it will be fabulous. For everyone that was around for her reign, you'll understand that last part.
Mm-hmm.
But again, thank you, Your Grace. Thank you, Cal, for the technical help during the first part of the show. And to everyone out there watching, stay safe, keep social distancing, keep washing your hands, and we look forward to seeing you all hopefully soon.
And wear a mask.
Wear a mask, yes. Absolutely. Well said, Your Grace.